Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is calling for stricter regulation of the web.
Facebook wants new regulations. Mark Zuckerberg wrote an op-ed that said, lawmakers often tell me we have too much power over speech, and frankly, I agree. We shouldn't make so many important decisions on our own. Wow, it sounds so self-sacrificing. But give me a break. Big companies tend to like regulation because it gives them an advantage over smaller competitors. After all, startups can't afford the squads of lawyers and compliance officers that Facebook employs. In France, they embedded officials inside the company.
My position is not that there should be no regulation.
Zuckerberg issued his call for regulation after spending hours being grilled by members of Congress.
I think the internet is increasingly
Do you embrace
important.
regulation?
I think the real question, as the internet becomes more important in people's lives, is what is the right regulation, not whether there should be or
But you
not.
as a company welcome regulation?
I think if it's the right regulation, then
You
yes.
think-
Zuckerberg's no dope. He sees which way the wind is blowing.
So would you work with us in terms of what regulations you think are necessary in your industry?
Absolutely.
So Facebook will work with politicians to shape regulation. What's sad is that if anyone should fight for permissionless innovation, it should be people like Mark Zuckerberg. It's no accident that the amazing wealth creation that brought us Facebook, Google, Instagram, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, smartphones, computers, all happened in the two big metropolitan areas farthest from Washington, D.C.
Microsoft in the early 1990s was the largest company in the world, incredibly successful. And they spent exactly $0 on lobbying, on cronyism, on lawyers. They had no presence in Washington, D.C., not a single lawyer.
Instead of spending money on lawyers and lobbyists, they spent it on technology. But once politicians noticed their success,
They were literally brought in front of Congress. They were yelled at by a Republican, Orrin Hatch from Utah. He said, you guys need to get involved here in Washington, D.C. You need to build a building here. You need to hire lawyers here. In other words, the unspoken text, you need to bribe me. And Microsoft walked out of the meeting and said, you know what? You leave us alone, we will leave you alone. We're busy. We're running the biggest company in the world. There's a lot to do.
The Justice Department has charged Microsoft.
6 months later, knock on the door at Microsoft. We're from the Justice Department. And we're here to prosecute you because you are offering the American public, you're offering your customers a product for free. This is Internet Explorer at a time when we were buying Netscape and paying money for it. They offered it for free. And that was deemed, bad business practices. They were trying to dominate the market. For 10 years, they had to fight that lawsuit. They lost. They got regulated. They got controlled. Guess how much Microsoft spends today in Washington, D.C.?
how much?
Tens of millions of dollars. They have a beautiful building about equal distance from the White House and from Congress. They have lawyers, they have lobbyists, they spend a lot of money, and indeed a lot of the other tech companies like Google learned the lesson.
The lesson is, if you don't want politicians destroying your business, practice self-defense. Go to Washington and give them money. Kiss their rings.
Making sure to keep politicians at bay. So a lot of the lobbying, a lot of the so-called cronyism is self-defense.
Yes, and Zuckerberg's acting in self-defense. But it's still ugly. And Silicon Valley's crony capitalism is a threat to future innovation. But in fairness to Zuckerberg, he didn't start it.
But let's remember where cronyism comes from. Cronyism occurs when government starts interfering in business. And then business has to defend itself. And as soon as it hires the lawyers and the lobbyists to defend itself, it quickly slips in to now gaining favors from the government who has all this power. If we really want to end cronyism, what we need to do is reduce the power of politicians over our lives, actually separate economics from state.